miles we've journeyed, for we have been told the world is my parish. Come answer the call.
Well, here we are in the eternal city of Rome. Over my shoulder, I'm sure you can see the ancient city of Rome, called the Roman Forum. That was the Rome of the Caesars, the emperors, before Christ. It's a city which is the center of the Catholic faith, where Christianity spread from here across the world. It's the city of the Holy See, the successor of St. Peter. St. Peter walked these streets, and St. Paul. Both were killed here. Paul was beheaded, and St. Peter was crucified upside down. It's a city of nightclubs, of entertainment and the arts. It's a city of food and excitement. In fact, Rome's got everything. I lived here for 4 years. When I studied, I was ordained here. I spent the 4 happiest years of my life in Rome, and so for me, it's coming home. But for those of you who've never seen Rome, I think you're going to enjoy this, because it might become a home for you too, even just through the film. But we are looking forward to great excitement here. God bless you. This is what's left of the mighty empire of Caesar. Columns of marble supported by grass. The whitewashed arches no longer echo the cheers for conquering heroes and honored statesmen. Army after army has marched through the city, but only one has conquered it. Behind me, over my right shoulder, is the triumphal arch of Constantine. The Emperor Constantine. It was Constantine who gave us the freedom as Christians in 312 AD. The Edict of Milan, when he made Christianity the official religion of the empire. Prior to that, it was persecuted. And the Colosseum to our right, of course, was the scene of many occasions with Christians. Although wrongly people thought that the Christians were persecuted here in the arena, it was mainly for gladiators. There's another part of Rome where they had the Olympics, where the actual Christians were in the Colosseum, another Colosseum in Rome. But this one here is where people come to commemorate Christianity, and every Good Friday, the Holy Father comes through the triumphal arch of Constantine and processes around here and goes all through the Colosseum, carrying the cross, where they have the Stations of the Cross. It is said that what is made by man does not last, but what is made by God lasts forever. Amidst the ruins of the city is St. Peter's Basilica, the heart and soul of the Catholic Church and home to its popes. Nearly 2,000 years ago, a man named Jesus was sentenced to die by the Roman Empire through a man named Pontius Pilate. To one of his disciples, Peter, Jesus once said, "Peter, you are a rock, and upon this rock I will build my church." Caesar's empire has come and gone, but the Catholic Church has endured since the day Christ founded it, almost 2,000 years ago. St. Peter is now buried under the main altar of the Basilica. This is one of the oldest roads in the city, and it's still used today. The narrow path is lined with stones from the days of St. Peter.
Along this road, according to legend, Peter met a man he later recognized as Jesus. He asked the Lord why he had come to Rome. Jesus replied that he was coming back to be crucified again. Peter understood. He returned to Rome and was crucified on the cross, like Jesus. But he insisted on hanging upside down because he said he was not worthy to die as Jesus had died. At the place where Jesus and Peter had met on the road, a set of footprints was left in the dirt. They are now preserved in a small church on the road, are believed to be the footprints of Christ.
This is the place where St. Paul was beheaded. And legend has it that when his head was chopped off, it bounced 3 times. And each place where the head bounced, a fountain sprang up. We'll show you those fountains in a moment. And so it's called in Italian Tre Fontane, or 3 fountains. Behind me you'll see an abbey, a Cistercian abbey, which has been here since the 4th century. It's one of the oldest buildings in Rome, this particular building. Parts of it original, parts obviously renewed. The monks have a vow of silence who live here, and they request when you go inside the abbey that you keep silent. So we do most of the talking out here. When you walk in, the silence overwhelms you. It just, wow, it engulfs you. Right now we're here at the barracks where the soldiers were, and Paul was in this particular place. He was imprisoned overnight before Paul was imprisoned here overnight before his execution. And the next day he was led out of here down those steps to where we'll be going now to be executed. This was a hill here. This building wasn't there obviously then, it was just built over the building. So the head bounced there, then down to the next pillars, down to the bottom one, that's the 3 fountains. And 3 fountains sprang up, and that's why they call it Tre Fontane, or 3 fountains. Whether the legend is true or not, it's certainly historically true. This is where he was executed. Yeah. You are explaining on the spot where he died. We're now going to move out of here and go across the street where it's reported allegedly that Mary appeared to a man who was planning to kill Pope Pius XII. It was back in the 50s, and he hated Catholics. He was an Italian Protestant, believe it or not, and thought the Pope was the Antichrist and thought he was doing Christ's work by killing him. And as he sat this one afternoon with his children, they were playing ball, and the ball fell into a cave, and when his kids didn't come out, he went in to see, and they were kneeling before the Blessed Mother. And because of that, the whole family's become Catholic. The daughter is now a nun here in Rome.
The little boy, the 4-year-old, was kneeling in front of this cave, staring at something, and saying, "Beautiful lady, beautiful lady." And a sudden fear struck him. And then the other 2 children, who were 7 and 10, very close to the ages of the children of Fatima, they went to the cave and they fell on their knees, and they started to say, "Beautiful lady, beautiful lady." And he called the children, and they didn't answer him. They were simply staring at staring at whatever they saw. All he saw was this dirty cave. And he tried to lift the children to come out of here, and their bodies were so heavy he couldn't budge them. And then all of a sudden he saw this tremendous light, and he fell on his knees, and there he could no longer even see or hear the children. He saw Our Lady, and she said, "Enough of your persecuting me. Enter into the true faith, enter into the true fold, God's kingdom on earth." And then she said, "I am she who is in the Trinity. I am she of the Revelation." Revelation means apocalypse means revelation. And that was all she said. Now he was involved in a plot to kill the Pope. And after this conversion, he went to the Holy Father and confessed this whole thing and gave the Pope the very dagger that he had been going to use to kill the Pope. But the biggest thing was he became a totally changed person. And he said that, "I came here on the horse of hatred and persecution, and I was struck from my horse into the dust, and I have become a Christian full of life because of Our Lady, the Mother of the Church." He called her the Mother of the Church. This was one of those security prisons. They had a hole in the ground, the same as the prison they used for our Lord at the Last Supper they discovered in Jerusalem. And they would put the prisoner down, and there was no way out unless they were pulled up. That was a security prison. And when they brought major prisoners through the Via Sacra, they came, you know, some of these very important captives, you know, they brought back to Rome from the wars. They brought them to here and they put them in the security prison. St. Peter and Paul, while they were chained here together, of course, Peter was martyred on the Vatican Hill, and Paul was taken outside the walls because he was a Roman citizen. That they converted the prisoners. There were 40-some prisoners and the jailers. They converted them, and water came on the prison floor. Now, this is the interesting thing. There's water down there on the prison floor, like a little spring. And the tradition is, now, of course, people tend to forget after 2,000 years, they don't believe these things. The tradition is that as Peter prayed, the water came in the prison floor, and he used it to baptize them, and the water's still there. Okay? Well, who believes it anymore, right? But we always go down there and we say the Apostles' Creed, because every saint in the last 2,000 years has visited this prison, St. Therese being one of them. This monk, whom I hope you'll meet, speaks Russian because he was born in Odessa. And he was chosen as a guide for Russians coming to Rome for the Holy Year. Now, they were real Russians. They were the communists, you know. And so he came, he visited Mamertine prison, and of course he explained what happened, and this water came, and Peter, you know, baptized those who would be converted. And later that afternoon, the same group, the Russians, one of them came up to him and said, "Could you take me back to that place, you know, where the water was, where Peter baptized them?" And, oh, you know, he said, "Well, you know, we haven't got time," you know, the whole group. And the man got tears in his eyes. He said, "Isn't it possible to go back?" And my friend, he's an abbot, Abbot Anastasius. He said, he hesitated, and he said, "Didn't you see that I was limping?" He said, he said, "Look," he said, "after everybody left, I waited until the end," and he said, "I believe if St. Peter did that, then I can be cured." And they put my foot in that water. And from that time on, when I've gone to the Mamertine prison, I haven't thought it was just a legend.
We're now at the Circus Maximus in English, Circo Massimo. Originally, if you could imagine this, with seats all around, like a stadium. It's now a ruin. Of course, there's nothing left of it. You can see a little bit at the end of the walls. But it seated in those days 250,000 people, 250,000. And it was here that the early Christians went to the lions. They also had chariot races here. If you remember seeing that film, I think Barabbas, didn't they have a chariot race or something in that? And it would have been here where they would have the chariot races, and also the early Christians being sent to the lions. Most people who come to Rome wrongly believe that the early Christians went to the lions at the Colosseum. And the Colosseum was for gladiators. And of course the Colosseum holds 80,000 as opposed to this which holds 250,000. Over here you see some of the ruins of the palaces, the times of the emperor. And if you look over to my left shoulder, right over my left shoulder over there, you can see the Victor Emmanuel monument, which was built for the first king of Italy, King Victor Emmanuel, where they had the tomb of the unknown soldier. Over here, you can, down this way, there's over on my side over here, is the Aventine Hill. As you know, Rome is built on 7 hills, the 7 hills of Rome. And one of the hills is the Aventine, and there are many beautiful churches. Altogether, there are over 400 churches in Rome. Each one of them, even though they call them small, for us would be cathedrals. They're all gigantic, even the smallest of them. And of course, the largest ones here, the most popular ones, are called basilicas. There are 4 basilicas in Rome. The Church of St. Peter, which is of course in the Vatican, brought over the tomb of St. Peter. The Church of Rome, the cathedral itself, is John Lateran, which is dedicated to the Holy Savior. St. Paul's outside the walls, which is dedicated to St. Paul, where his body is buried, and St. Mary Major's. We will be visiting all those churches. Right quickly, we're here in St. Paul's Basilica, one of the 4 major basilicas built by Constantine. The part I'm standing in that way is new because it was renewed after a fire, but the part behind in the apse is the original from the 4th century. Under the canopy, where the little light is burning, is the actual tomb of St. Paul the Apostle. The Basilica of St. Mary Major is a piece of the manger of Bethlehem.
In another are the steps where Jesus walked after he was sentenced to die by Pontius Pilate. Drops of Jesus' blood have stained the stones, and it does not come out. The wealth of paintings and statues from some of the most famous artists in history are stored here, including 2 by Michelangelo. This is his statue of Moses, coming down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments. And in one chapel of St. Peter's is the quiet but commanding presence of the Pietà, Christ lying dead in his mother's arms. But the Roman Catholic Church is not about the dead, it's about the living. The Pope, as the head of the Church, guides the faithful all over the world from Rome. The spiritual remembrance of the Lord Jesus Christ, Mass is said in many languages and celebrated by many nations in union with the Pope, the Vicar of Christ. To end the Queen of Peace flight pilgrimage in Rome, the pilgrims joined the Pope for a special Mass. This is a beatification ceremony for 121 Spanish martyrs who were killed for their religion at the hands of the communists. In addition, a laywoman named Narcisa Moran was also beatified.
I have learned how a lot of this world must have had to live for 60, 70 years under communism. I've been in a lot of long lines and developed a tremendous amount of patience that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And as a result of that, I think I've been able to really appreciate the suffering they've gone through, and I think it's preparing me for some suffering that's probably coming for all of us. And so I guess I've learned some tolerance and some patience and some kindness, and that no matter how tired you get and how little sleep you get, God can give you the ability to go forward. It's deepened my faith. And in a particular way, since I'm Protestant, I have really felt this hunger for unity.
Oh, we'll definitely be changed. I mean, there was a lot of praying, and we saw some poverty, and of course we saw that, in our opinion, probably Russia is not going to be hurt by our being there. But yes, there will definitely be a change in us, basically spiritually, I think.
The logistics were terrible, but overlooking that, it, like anything else, you get out of something what you bring to it. And essentially we came to experience the spirituality of the various places we went to. And that I think everybody did in one way or another.
It's changed me a lot. I've learned some new words to my vocabulary, but one of the most important things is to trust and to have faith. And if you give it over completely, that you will be led. I felt that I was being led for the last probably 3 years by our Blessed Mother.
To be a pilgrim means to become a little child and know that your father and your mother in heaven will provide, and get rid of all this stuff that requires you to control your schedule, to have all these knowings about where you're headed, and just to let go and just see how it works out. Because I'm very much a control person. And I've learned to be a little kid and know that Mom and Dad will take care of me. That's what it means to me to be a pilgrim now.
Well, you've been on the trip with us now, and you've seen what we've seen. Hopefully you've experienced something of the things we experience. I know for me it was the highlight was probably Russia. Mainly because I wasn't expecting the feelings that I got in Moscow and the Russian people. I think, to me, one thing I'll never ever forget were the Russians who were accepting the rosaries. And these little old American ladies and old men on our group, and young ones too, of course, all of us going out, handing out rosaries and scapulars and medals in the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg. One night we went down to the underground in the metro of Moscow, and I couldn't believe these ladies
walking up and down the train, handing out rosaries, and everybody was accepting them, kissing them, blessing themselves. I remember mentioning to the group afterwards, could you imagine any of you doing that in New York, or Chicago, or St. Louis, or New Orleans? Could you imagine going downtown in our American cities, handing out rosaries, and everyone accepting them? But it happened in Russia, didn't it? You see, just like the Blessed Mother predicted almost 100 years, 75 years ago, Fatima, I will be victorious in Russia. My Immaculate Heart will conquer if you pray the rosary, if you do those 6 Saturdays, those 5 rather Saturdays. See, and people have done that. All over the world, some of you have been praying. Those of you who weren't on the trip, you were part of that trip, even though you weren't with us, because your prayers made you part of that trip. All those of you who've prayed the rosaries, all those of you who've made the first 5 Saturdays, all those of you who've fasted, you were part of this victorious flight of the Queen. And we saw her victory when we crowned her Queen in Moscow. That was what highlighted the trip for me. And I'd like to encourage you now, that wasn't the end, that was the beginning. Russia is not yet converted. The conversion has begun. Russia is wide open now to conversion. It's hungry. Isn't it amazing that everything Mary predicted has come true? That the Berlin Wall was down, that the 2 Germanys are one, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Russia itself, all no longer communist. And all fell without a shot, without anyone being injured or hurt. See, the weapons were not guns, the weapons were rosaries and fastings. And now Mary's asking that again for the world. Not only does Russia need to be converted, we in the West need to be converted. We've got a war here. All kinds of terrible things happening in our own country. Immoral things, too numerous to mention. We need a conversion. And the same rosaries and the same prayers that made Mary victorious in Russia will make her victorious also in the West. Not only does communism need to be conquered, so does materialistic capitalism when it's not of God. See, the Pope himself said, both can be wrong. The greed of money, the capitalistic society, and the proletariat type of communism of Russia with its atheism. Both are 2 mountains that have to be knocked down. And that it even brought in Medjugorje, between those mountains, which what Medjugorje means, between the mountains. And now the Queen comes again between the mountains to say, let's level those mountains and make Mary victorious Queen. God bless you all.
As I kneel before you, as I bow my head in prayer, take this day, make it yours, and fill is lost in your embrace. Ave
Did you enjoy this tape? Did you find it inspiring? Would you like others to share in that inspiration? Well then, be a partner with us, because these tapes are viewer supported. You can obtain a copy by writing to the above address.